Hello everyone. Today on this lecture we discuss about experimental research design. In earlier class we already discussed what are the different types of research design. In the quantitative research design we will see there that they classify into experimental research design and non-experimental research design. And again this experimental research design is divided into or classified into three segments. One is the true experimental, second is quasi-experimental, and third one is the pre-experimental. So that will be discussed on this lecture. So first we have to know about what is experimental research design. So the experimental research design, here what happens, the researcher investigate that there is an interaction between independent variable and dependent variable. Okay, so it is in this method that the researcher investigate there is an interactions between independent variable and dependent variable, or otherwise you can say the researcher want to establish the causal relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable. So independent variable, the researcher in independent variable, he purposefully modify or maybe increase or decrease or manipulate, okay, the independent variable, and whatever the change is found in dependent variable, that will be observed by the researcher. Okay, so this is called the cause and effect relationship or the causal relationship between the independent variable and the dependent that the researcher want to establish. Okay, so in experimental research, the researcher play an active role. So he has to actively involve in three works. But first one, that is the manipulating the independent variable through treatment or interventions. Manipulate means he will purposefully modify or increase or decrease the independent variable and see what the effect is found on the dependent variable. Okay. Second, controlling the extraneous variable. So that is one of the main work, that is the researcher have the control the extraneous variable. So extraneous variable is the outside factor, that is not independent variable, they are the outside factor, but they affect the outcomes of the dependent variable. Okay, so that will be under control by the researcher, and measurement of the outcome of the dependent variable, and after control of the extraneous variable by the manipulation of the independent variable, what result or what outcomes is observed, that will be observed by the researcher. So these three things was being done by the researcher, that's why they actively involved in the experimental research design. Next, the experimental design, there are three types. One is the one is the true experimental, second is the quasi-experimental, and third was the pre-experimental. That will be discussed. First, we will see what is true experimental research design. The name is indicated, these are accurate methods. This is an accurate form of experimental design, or you say it is the most powerful method design to investigate the problem. And the other also known as, that is randomized controlled trial. It is also named as randomized controlled trial. So total in the on this name, the randomized controlled trial, the three characteristics is there, that will be discussed on this lecture. Okay, so what are the three main characteristics of the true experimental research design? First one is the manipulation, second is the control of extraneous variable, and third one is the randomizations. Okay, so we will discuss by an example. First we will take an example of experimental research. So if a researcher wants to investigate what is the effect of new methods of teaching on the score of the student's performance. Okay, so the researcher want to investigate the new teaching methods, either role play, digital methods are now, modern methods are there. So by use of the new teaching methods, what will be the score of the students. Okay, that is the researcher want to investigate. So here the new teaching method, that is the independent variable, and score, student score or the student performance, that is the dependent variable. Okay, and what happened then for this investigation, the researcher select the standard 6 students, and from the target group prior population they select some sample, and from the sample they divide into two groups. Okay, first is the control group, another is the experimental group. So the control groups and the experimental group are all identical, but difference is that the control group are not receiving any interventions or not receiving any treatment, but experimental group that receiving the intervention or the treatment. So here as you were investing in the new methods of teaching, the students score. So in control group we are not providing the new methods of teaching. As usual, what regularly they are teaching in the class, that's going on the control group, but in experimental group here we are providing the new methods of teaching. Okay, and after the session gone, then when you go for the test, we'll find the experimental had score A plus, that is the A grade, and the B in the control group they have scored the B and the C plus, that grades are there. Okay, so by this investigation determined that new methods of teaching, or the if you new add the new methods of teaching, then the student performance will be increases. Okay, so manipulation is understood because we manipulate. Okay, next if I say those students who were taken in the experimental group, they have the good academic performance, or they have prior knowledge about the test. So they have good, they got the good mark, so they have scored A plus. Okay, so that is so in this so the prior knowledge, or you say the academic performance, prior academic achievements is there on these students, that's why they have scored A plus. Okay, so now it will be one of the external factor enter into this investigation, because before that before this external factor we are discussing that the new methods of teaching that will be improve the studies or the improve the score of the students. Okay, but as you are adding one of the another factor, that the students have an prior knowledge, or these students have an good academic achievements is there, so they by the less effort they will achieve the good marks. Okay, so this is called the extraneous variable. But in true experimental research design, the researcher have a control of this extraneous variable. Many of the times there will be one or more extraneous variable or external factors are affecting the research, or the outcomes or the dependent variable, so they have the full control on this extraneous variable. Okay, so the researcher who will select the sample or the subject or the students for this control group and the experimental group, the researcher will take the students those who are average. Okay, we'll take that type of students. Okay, those students who are taking in the control group are the same, are matching with the experimental group. Okay, so we are taking the average students, average IQ students, or the 60% score students in the two groups, that is control group and experimental group. Then we go on research, and after intervention or after new methods of teaching, they have scored the control group B plus, B score, and A grade or excellence score you will get by the experimental group. So this is called control over the extraneous variable, and this extraneous variable can be avoided by randomizations. Okay, so next third point, we will reach the third point, that is the randomization. So what is randomization? It's a sudden selections. Okay, so you take the both the control group or the experimental, the subject or the student you are taking as the students here as a subject, so they are both identical, same, but difference is that the control group is not receiving intervention and the experimental group they have receiving the, so both are same characteristics. Okay, well randomly select the students, some of the students in the control group, some of the students in the experimental group. Okay, so randomization means each participants, now here the participant is the students, each participants has the equal chance being assigned to each condition. maybe this roll number 1 and 2 I have under the control group, and 6 and 7 in the experimental. So maybe the 1 and 7 I have take 1 and 7 the control group, 2 and 6 roll number in the experimental group. Randomly I will select the students or the subject. So by this way we can avoid what the bias, selection bias or the confounding bias. Okay, so confounding bias is the by this way we can avoid or eliminate the confounding variables. So the confounding variables are the confusing variable that will be affect both the independent variable and the dependent variable. Okay, so by the way of randomization method or by the randomization method is one of the component in the characteristics of the true experimental region. We can avoid the extraneous variable, and we will be the threat of internal validity will be minimized. Okay, what are the methods of randomization? So there are simple method of randomization is there. One is the flip of coin. The suppose in classrooms we are taking students for control group and experimental group. So you will declare if the head will become, then the students will become into the control group. If tail will become, then the students will become in the experimental group. So by this way you randomly take the students. Otherwise you would card by taking the flick cards or playing cards. So if you pick the from the bunch of the cards, if the students select odd number, then you will first declare the odd. Those who are getting odd number, they will become on the control group. Those who are even number, they will become to the experimental group. So by this way we will take the students. So each students have the chance to come in both the groups. Okay, so this is called randomization. Each participant has an equal chance being assigned to the each conditions. Okay, so that we avoid the extraneous variable and the confounding variable, and the threat of internal validity will be reduced. So this is the three main characteristics of true experimental research design. So later we will discuss what are the different types of true experimental research design. I hope you understand from this lecture what are the characteristics of research design and what is defined by mean by the experimental research design. Thank you for watching. Please keep on subscribing.